Hey everyone, welcome to Open. I'm Rhina Valentin, your host of Café con Leche for the next hour. Encouraging you to get social with us online, that is. Tweet us and follow us on Instagram at BronxNet TV and like us on Facebook at Open BronxNet Television. And of course, you can always find me too on Twitter, FB, Instagram, Insta Stories, and LinkedIn at Rhina Valentin. So, since the beginning of the pandemic, there's been a rise on crime against Asian Americans, and they've been attacked, discriminated against, pretty much leading up to these most recent fatalities. And now more than ever, the Asian community needs all of our support. And our first guest is the executive director of the Asian American Arts Alliance, a non-for-profit organization dedicated to supporting and strengthening the Asian American artists and cultural groups in New York City. Joining us to tell us about the organization, along with different actions to stop Asian American Pacific Islander hate, please welcome Executive Director Lisa J. Gold. Hi and welcome.
Hi, Rhina. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Well, thank you for making the time, and I'm sure it's been a very busy week or couple of weeks for you. Let's just talk about the resolve, right? And so let's give everyone a little background on the Asian American Arts Alliance. I know you've been in existence for 37 years. The beauty of what you offer is a lot of information. It's a great resource. But let's just talk about why it's so important to have organizations such as the Asian American Arts Alliance.
Sure. There are, these kind of like invisible boundaries or, barriers to access for a lot of artists of color. And what we try to do is create access to what we call cultural gatekeepers, people like curators or producers or talent scouts, artist management, people that can allow artists access to industries, access to abilities and opportunities to, share their talents and their stories. We provide a lot of services to support professional practicing artists, whether that is, workshops on basic things like how to do your taxes, but we also specifically enable and encourage conversations about identity and that the ties between identity, politics, and art making. So we're a little unique in that way. In fact, we're the only organization in the country that supports Asian American artists of all disciplines.
That's beautiful. And it's definitely a nice, resourceful website to just browse through. And so with that said, with also representing the voice and the culture in various genres, right? Which is what you were just sharing. You also have been able to sustain the organization as a whole. I mean, amid a pandemic, I've worked with a lot of organizations such as yours. I mean, obviously not the Asian American Arts Alliance. However, I can only imagine what it's been for you this past year, and how have you been able to service the artists in this past year?
It's been hard. At the beginning of the pandemic, of like everyone else, we, shut down our programming and we launched a survey to our constituents to find out what they needed. And of course, like every other artist population, they had lost all sources of their income. And we were struggling ourselves because we didn't know if we were going to get funding. That's a whole other conversation that we can have about the disparities in funding to Asian American and BIPOC communities. But, we launched a series of programs to support artists. In the spring, we did a series of story circles, which allowed people to come together in a safe space. We did a panel on steps you can take to protect yourself and resources against anti-Asian violence. Sadly, that's still relevant. And we launched a virtual residency program. The demand for that was so high because artists were feeling so isolated and not getting the critical feedback that they needed. And so we launched 2 cohorts of that, and it's yielded just some beautiful relationships and support systems and networks for artists. I'm so pleased with how that's come about.
That's lovely. I did notice that you have this regular Instagram takeover also that you offer, which again, you know, we're all kind of navigating through this virtual world, just trying to be innovative in whatever way that we can connect, because artists are used to being amongst audience, and I think that's been the really biggest downfall of this pandemic, is that isolation.
Yeah, definitely. You know, so the silver lining is that, you know, when we do programs over Zoom, we're able to reach more people. We're able to reach people in places and connect people that wouldn't normally have the opportunity to come together. So, you know, that's one thing that's helping the isolation, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's the upside of it. And it's definitely a great outlook to have, because it's like, well, you know, now we're reaching the Pacific side of the Asian community, or whomever, right? And so that leads me into the Asian American Pacific Islanders anti-hate initiative that you've also created. So now that's the social justice work that you do. So let's talk a little bit about this pamphlet that you're distributing amongst the I guess members and or whomever, right, really wants to just take part in standing against and being in solidarity with our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of people feel helpless, both within the community and people that want to support the community. They're like, I'm not Asian American, I don't know what to do. But, you know, just like the Black Lives Matter movement over the, you know, artists and people have been taking part in that, stepping in, stepping up, showing support. So we created a quick PDF. It's on our website, and it's also, you know, something we can send out, but it's just, you know, 10 steps, easy steps you can take. And, you know, it ranges from following organizations, community organizations that are doing the work, amplifying their message, educating yourself. You know, there is a long, long history of anti-Asian discrimination in this country. PBS did a beautiful series, a docu-series called Asian Americans, which is available for viewing and provides a lot of information that none of us, or very few of us, were taught in school. You know, sadly, I think a lot of it stems from education. And so just educating yourself is the first step that people can take. So I recommend checking out the Smithsonian APA Center, checking out the docu-series. And there's just so many great journalists and articles that are talking about the history of you know, Asian Americans in this country.
I'm making note because it just all rings a bell in just focusing on the upside, as we started earlier, to what this pandemic has done. Obviously, we've all endured like a lot of morbid and just unbelievably surreal, like, death and tragedy, and I mean, we can go on with the negative descriptions. However, the one thing I noticed that it's brought in, and this is in speaking as a person of color, is that there's this light that's been shed on the lack of education that is being presented to everyone that has their ancestry that they carry with them. And so it becomes a question of like, well, you know, how does that get implemented into the school system?
Yeah,
Because, right?
exactly. You know, and we need to demand it. And, you know, part of that is having, you know, it starts at the top. It starts with having an API or liaison with the White House, and having, you know, people in power that can advocate for the community. So whether it's the Department of Education or the Department of Transportation, talking about the building of the railroads and the Chinese immigrant, you know, contributions to that. So I think it comes from the top, but also parents and people, we need to use our voice. We need to hold our public officials accountable and ask them, what are you doing to support this? And, you know, politicians they love being tweeted at, they love to follow Twitter. So, you know, tweet at them, ask them, what are you doing? How are you ensuring that our voices are heard and our stories are told?
All right, exactly. And so before we go, this is our last what would you like people to leave with? I mean, obviously, we've already sent them to the Asian American Arts Alliance website to obtain the pamphlet or the PDF file that you created that is in solidarity of anti-Asian hate. And you just informed them, tweet at your elected officials. Is there anything else that we didn't discuss in just steering our viewers into being a contribution?
Yeah, I think really the most important thing is just being aware, checking in with your friends, your colleagues, your employees, ask them how they're doing, right? And have the conversations, be open to communicating and understanding where people are coming from. I think that's probably the most important thing. We're this shared humanity. We're accountable to each other. We need to support each other. So, I would love people just to take one action today, to pledge to take one action, however they feel comfortable, in support of the community.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa J. Gold, Executive Director at Asian American Arts Alliance. And, that also contributes to our mental wellness. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're all in this together. All right, you guys, once again, to support the Asian American Arts Alliance, you can visit aaartsalliance.org. All right, we have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll hear about an event celebrating frontliners and the essential workers for Women's History Month. Don't go anywhere.